Hi there, my name is Martin Fisher and this is the Path to Wholeness podcast on October the 26th, 2019. With me I have Morten Nygård, who is part of our wonderful little team. Morten is going to be interviewing me today and the results will be appearing all sorts of places and all sorts of media all over the world. Well, I'm excited, I hope you are too.
Today I have a wonderful person, a very good friend of me. I know him for many years and his name is Morten Fisher, and you can introduce yourself first.
Good morning everybody, my name is Martin Fisher. I'm a Natural Energy 5 and I've been working with this discovery for the better part of 10 years. I'm proud to say that I was the first person my wife identified on her own, and since that point we've been working with 9,000 people, helping everybody understand what their natural energy is, what is it that their physiology informs them about.
But before we go into that, how is your route to reach Susan? How did you...
Susan and I first met in the early 1990s, and we were working at the same company, run by a guy called Tom Siebel, who went on to do other things. And we met each other. I was a consultant there and had been working there a few weeks when she came back from honeymoon. She had just married the father of her 3 kids, and we hung out, we played bridge together, we got to know each other really well, we really liked each other, but it was very clear that that was all there was. I was around just after her first baby was born. I met Phoenix when she was days old, and then we stayed friends, still played bridge, and then by the time she was pregnant with the second baby, I decided to move on and move to pastures new, which I duly did.
But you're from England?
I'm from England, yes. I graduated from Manchester Institute of Technology in 1980, and my drive was to be in computers. My dad taught me binary when I was 9. He was one of the first programmers in the world, and computing was always the thing that I knew how to do.
So you've been in Silicon Valley?
I went to Silicon Valley in 1981, was there for a year, went back to the UK to start a master's, came back to the US in 1983 without having finished my master's, and basically I've been in the US ever since. I became a citizen in 1996 and I'm on my 3rd passport, so I consider myself American with an English accent.
And you like airplanes because...
I was actually, when I was a baby, my mother put me in the garden under the approach to what was then Heathrow Airport, and so my self-calming happened as the airplanes flew over my head. And I started to build model airplanes when I was 10. I had them attached to the ceiling in my room, and I always wanted to become a pilot, but my eyes were never up for it. And although my best friend at school managed to become a pilot by going through the British Airways system, I became a pilot by going to Silicon Valley. I arrived in Silicon Valley in May. I had my pilot's license by December. I was lucky enough through my work at Yahoo to be able to afford to actually get to be a jet pilot. And then I spent the early 2000s flying jets commercially for a company called Pacific Jet in California.
So I have a personal opinion about you, that you're very, very smart.
Thank you.
So I'm wondering about, when did you know that you were very smart?
I appreciate the compliment, thank you.
Thank you.
I see myself as very able to get concepts together and somewhat fairly good at describing concepts. It depends on what one's definition of smart is. I don't have a hugely amazing intuition about new things. If someone says, how do I solve this problem, I'm really good at solving problems. In terms of how do what we currently know become something new, I can do that. But I'm not going to come up with this amazing new idea very often. Like, I'm not Steve Jobs. I couldn't come up with this idea about making a whole new interface so that everyone has a computer in their room. But if someone says, let's do that, I can certainly help that build. And when I learned to do computers in the 1980s, nothing's changed. The concepts have changed, things are smaller, things are faster, but the general concepts are still changed. So while I am good at knowing stuff, I don't see myself as smart the way that some people are smart. I mean, I'm not going to sit down and come up with a great new mathematical idea. So I am intelligent, and by some measures smart, but I wouldn't call myself a genius.
But if we take the airplane and we go up in the air and we look at 9 energy, what is it?
And the answer is very much about context. My world, Natural Energy 5, I have an understanding, which is unique to me, so each of us has our own understanding, about how things fit together.
Yeah.
You know, why do things work? My gift, if you will, is trying to figure out how things work. As a 5, I'm pretty sure at some level I can learn anything I need to learn. And I may need to die to learn the unknowable, but nevertheless, everything is knowable at some level. So for me, 9 energies is a perfect answer to where the world is right now.
Yeah.
It is where do people think?
Yeah.
Where do they interact with each other? What are they missing in their lives? How can they grow? Because my goal is twofold. It's helping people understand that there's more. There's a wholeness that can be achieved by understanding all these 9 energies. And it's also understanding the spirituality of life. I think there is a spiritual element to us all that is either acknowledged or not acknowledged depending on one's background. I'm not saying there's necessarily the right religion, but there is a definite awareness, at least to me, and I believe part of my role is helping other people understand that there is a spiritual element to our lives that is more than just our physical body. And 9 energies is part of that, because as we experience the physical and become more aware of our physical, we also become more aware of our spiritual. We've started calling the term physio-spiritual.
So if we say that spiritual is here and physical is here, what is spiritual?
Spiritual is anything to me that's not physical.
Oh.
So there is a school of thought that we have, you know, the ability to read other people's minds, determine the future, move things with our bodies. What we ask people when we're working with them with 9 energies is not to disbelieve. What is the magic that you believe that you can do in your body that as a child there were all these possibilities? I think there's a reason why things like Harry Potter and all the other magic things appeal to many, many people. Not everybody for sure. And not everybody is attached or connected to the idea that there is a more than the physical. But I believe that part of my role as a Natural Energy 5 is helping people understand the possibility that there is more than just our physical reality.
So the disbelief is that not getting attached to what you believe. Is that what you mean?
Well, it's maybe, as an example, I'll say that many people with your Natural Energy 3, believe when you're a child that you have an imaginary friend. And it's pretty clear to me, and I'm willing to accept that those friends are not imaginary. They are an element of another energy that you're connected to that you can see that for sure your parents couldn't see, and your brothers and sisters probably couldn't see. So
that's why I could play around with my own in the woods.
Yes, because you're not actually on your own. Right? There's all these other things going on, other energies.
It makes sense.
And so for me as a Natural Energy 5, I don't believe that my body is my entirety. I believe I have an entity which I see and visualize as an eggshell-shaped thing around my body.
Super interesting.
And most of the processing and most of the interaction that I have with the world is through that entity, not my body. I know I have a body, but it's a source of information. It's a reading device more than it is a decoding device and a wearing. It doesn't inform me. My information comes from my entity. And some of that is physical and some of that's not physical, which I call spiritual.
How do you see 9 energy in the world in 40 years from now?
I would like to see it that people have the awareness that it exists. Whether or not people believe in the reality of it, I'm not as worried about. Because just the conversation that does such a thing exist is the first step of bringing more awareness into the world. It's like all the other sort of ideas that come out, first people say that can't be possible. Like the example I like to give is that in the early 1800s, no one knew what electromagnetic energy was. Didn't mean it didn't exist. There was still light, there was still lightning that produced radio waves, but no one knew it even existed. Someone said, oh, maybe it exists, and then 30 years later someone could measure it. I believe the same thing about the physio-spiritual world, is that it's there. We just don't have a way to measure it. And when we try to measure it, the people that believe in it can measure it, the people that don't believe in it can't measure it. It's very strange. But I would like the conversations to be happening. I think 40 years is way too short for everyone to know what their natural energy is, but it would be great if everybody knew when they were born what their natural energy was. Certainly it's detectable by people that are trained, and then you can raise children to support them, because children aren't like you. We know that in families the numbers don't repeat. We know that parents are different, we know that children are different, and we know that the words that you use, what you care about, everything about you is determined by your natural energy. It's how your senses inform you, if you will. So if you and your partner don't know that the same word means something different, or if you think your children are like you and you try to raise them to be like you, which is what we'd like, right? It's not going to work because your children are not like you. They don't care about what you care about. They probably don't even interact with you the way that you would expect them to do. So there is a level of friction in relationship and in families that just the awareness that people are different than you. And I don't mean intellectually, I mean a physical knowing in your body. Because Natural Energy 5s, we model people, we know intellectually, and the salespeople are always taught everyone's different. What the person you're selling to wants is not what you want. And if you know what they want, you can sell to solve their problem. That's how salespeople are taught. Because if you're trying to get a salesperson to sell something, and you're trying to sell them what you want, it's never going to work because they don't want what you want. So salespeople and other people are told people are different. There's many systems of difference in the Enneagram. Myers-Briggs, there's a million-way disc. Everyone is trying to determine how people are different because we know in our bodies that we're different. This is a way to physically tell, not by answering questions, by just knowing what does your body know, how people are different. So just the awareness of that.
So we were talking about the spiritual. I asked about the spiritual, what is spiritual, and so on. Now I'm going back to physical. So I'm wondering about something about you. How do you take care of your brilliant mind?
I take care of my brilliant mind by exercising it, by exercising it by learning.
By learning?
Yes, so I have two processes that are going on all the time. I'm scanning, I'm making sure that the world fits or doesn't fit into my model of it. And so my mind is constantly active there. And it's also challenged. I challenge my mind all the time. What is the answer to this? How does this work? And I liken it to a one-armed bandit at the casinos with 7 dials. And each dial, I have a question, I pull the handle, and the first dial comes back and you get a little star. And then maybe shortly afterwards another star as I start to get my picture. And then by the time you get all 7, all of a sudden there's a eureka moment. It's like, oh gosh, I understand. And so I constantly exercise my mind by learning and taking what I know and having it come out. My creativity when I'm working is in the computer world. Writing programs is my creativity. If I'm not writing programs, then I'm thinking and creating other knowings, because that is my creative artistic outlet.
That's amazing. So I'm just curious about this because we're doing this work and we always say that we have to take care of our bodies, but I'm starting to wonder more about when I hear you talk about how you take care of your talent, your energy, your being.
I think taking care of our being is unique for each of the 9. Each of us has a different thing to do in terms of longevity, in terms of being able to interact with other people. Obviously we need our bodies.
So then it leads to another interesting question, I hope so. How do you take care of your wife?
I take care of my wife by giving her the space to grow into what my 5ness sees as what her growth possibility could be. To some extent I know what her entity tells me that she could become. And so I try and give her space to go there. I don't push her there. Because you don't want to push someone, you need to give them the space. And sometimes that's a mistake in that my entity doesn't quite understand, so I'm given space in not necessarily the right place.
She's a natural energy 6.
She's a natural energy 6. So for natural energy 5, I scout out possibilities. So I think to myself, or I read, however you want to look at it, there's this possibility for Susan, my wife, to become this great whatever. So how do I set up a world where she can become that? And sometimes she decides, quite rightly, there's no right or wrong in how we interact, that that's a different path she wants to go. So now I look at that path and say, okay, how can I clear that path for her? How can I go ahead and see and make things easy for her to move down that path? Because I want her to be the best that she wants to be. And sometimes I want her to be more because her entity knows that she can be more, because sometimes our minds get in the way. It's like, well, I'd like to do this, but for whatever reason, it's not available to me yet. Well, okay, but patience is part of that.
So you experience her as an entity, as a whole being.
Absolutely.
And you have that whole being in your life, and you try to take care of that.
Absolutely, yes. So as a 5, when I meet somebody, they give me a model of themselves.
Oh.
So, for example, I'm sitting here with you and I have this model of Morten that basically most of the time matches Morten, the individual that's in front of me.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then I get to this place of, well, this is what the entity says it wants to do, and this is what Morten says he wants to do. Is there a gap? And if there's no gap, everything's wonderful. But if there's a gap, then maybe there's some space that I can give, or there's some, there's a little bit of, well, you asked me a question about what should I be doing? Is there a thought? And I can give you feedback and say, well, I think this, but entirely it's up to you. I'm not attached to how you do with that. I'm trying to answer for you or Susan or anybody else, what is it that your entity says you want to do versus what the person wants to do with all the human foibles versus the model, which is pretty much whole.
That's an interesting perspective. So it's much more, it's bigger perspective than just the person.
It's a person and the possibilities for that person. I think each of us, going back to the spiritual side, each of us has a wish list or an agreement or something more than their physical body. And for some of the odd-numbered energies.
So now I start to understand what you're talking about, physical, spiritual nature. So when those two are together, that's the entity of you.
Yes. There's the physical part and then there's the non-physical part, and that I call the entity. And we interact on both levels. And one of the nice things about natural energy work is that once you've been identified, you can communicate on your level much more clearly. I liken it to there being 9 radio stations. And when you're walking around without being identified at all you can hear is static. You've got some idea that there's more, but there's static. As soon as you're identified, you can hear your channel. Once you have access to all 9, you can learn how to activate all 9. Then you have access to all 9 channels, and you're getting music and NPR and Fox News, and you're getting all these different inputs from all these different things, and you can hear and you can broadcast more clearly on each of those energies. Because when you meet someone that has had the experience of being identified, you can feel them better, and my body and your body can communicate at a level that is way more than verbal. The research tells us that a much larger percent of our communication is not verbal. I don't know the number, 73%. One's joke is that 57% of all statistics are made up on the spot, just like that one. So but there's a large percentage of our intercommunication that is not verbal. And I believe the spiritual side of it is part of that.
Very good. So what kind of questions should I ask you?
Well, there's two answers to that. There's always many answers. So natural energy 5s don't live in a world of black and white. Nothing is 0% and nothing's 100%. And the more comfortable I am, the closer the number gets to 100%. So in this particular case, there's 2 parts. Okay, what questions should you ask me about Morten? Where's Morten going to go? There's what questions does Morten's body want me to ask so that I can remind you what your body's working for. And then there's this sort of the bigger picture. I mean, to me, my first question to you would be, what is your bigger picture for this work? Right? It's not about what's your view, it's about what's your bigger picture. And then there's what is missing in your spiritual life? What is that gap?
So what is missing in your spiritual life?
In my spiritual life, the voices, the guides, if you will, want me to emphasize the spiritual as much or more than the physical. Because I believe that natural energy 1s, natural energy 5s are the most directly connected to that spiritual energy. And my job is to emphasize to people that there is this spiritual energy, and we need to, who knows, be at least becoming aware of that and embracing it if that's the path that we feel drawn to. I think there is a split in the world where people consider that there is religion and non-religion, but there is also a spirituality that is neither. And just because there is spirituality doesn't necessarily mean you even need to believe in a higher power. There is just other energy out there. My personal belief is there are higher powers, plural, and that the spirituality is floating around. There's an energy. There is stuff out there that we haven't been able yet, deliberately or not, to decode, discover, measure.
So if we land this airplane and we put it on the ground and we put you on the ground and you lay on the ground and you look up, do you see things or do you hear things or do you take them in?
I am aware of things. So as a Natural Energy 5, my eyes are scanning, but I can turn my eyes off and still get input. But it is, the signs are always there, the indications are always there. You just have to know that you have to not disbelieve again. Okay. That there's something that you're aware of. And what I tend to do in some situations is that I will take an awareness and give it human form so that I can actually work with it. But it doesn't have to be there, it's there or not. One of the things that always amuses me is that we believe that we hear with our ears, and there's a million years of scientific measurement that says our ears do all the decoding and the rest, that we have these things, it hairs in our ears, etc., etc. But if you think about it, our bodies are mostly water. Sound goes through water way faster than it goes through air, 6, 9 times, whatever the number is. So if sound hits our body, the sound vibrates through the water in our body to our head way faster than it gets to our ears. So there's all sorts of accepted answers that I think are either distracting or not quite complete. And some of that is this awareness of spiritual energy. And the Western world has left some of that behind, with the exception of what used to be Russia. They've been, since the Second World War and onwards, doing a lot of research on this stuff, way more than the US has. No good, not bad. It's just that they're further down the path of doing that work. There are people that believe they have detectors for this spiritual energy. There's an organization in San Diego and others. So it's coming. But what we like to know about Nine Energies is that it gives us a context and an explanation for some of this stuff.
Is it any time that your beautiful mind is not working? Like working on something, I mean?
No.
Because I was about to ask, what are you doing then? What is your...
So things like if I'm meditating, all meditation does, it clears up the path for the wheels to keep spinning. My most useful times are just before I go to sleep and just after I wake up in the morning, when I'm in this transient state between conscious and unconscious. And that's when the most important, the most interesting things come. And the shower. Those are the places where I get the most insight all of a sudden. The rest of the time it's processing. But the ability to not disbelieve the information that's coming is the strongest there.
Beautiful. Wow, that's a lot of information. I think I need to look back and listen to this podcast many times to get everything that you have been talking about. Is there anything else that we should ask you about? I say we because
well, one of the interesting things about Natural Energy 5 and I think Natural Energy 4 is that we know that time is a human construct.
Oh, that's a human construct.
Yeah, there is certainly, if you look at quantum mechanics, which may or may not be, but there is a quantum mechanics, and quantum mechanics tells us that what we look at and how we observe affects the outcome. It also tells us that there are possibly many multiverses that are happening all at once. There are various theories about how time works, and of course there is the traditional / real versions of things, and then there's the non-traditional / not real, because they're not real because no one thinks about it. I don't know that we have the answer to anything. There's a lot of things in astronomy onwards that at some level return to a level of faith, because that's just the way that most people agree how it works.
When was the point, last question, I think this is one of the last questions, when was the point that you realized that the Nine Energy was true for you?
When Susan worked with me, it became very clear that she was able to see who I was and explain who I was, and that made a lot of sense. And my understanding and the understanding that she had at the time was nowhere near 100% accurate, but it was way past 60%, it was 60, 70%. And as we've gone over the last 10 years and worked to make our understanding stronger and worked on more people, getting more information, and threw away some of the things that weren't serving the work and got more things that were, it's become to the 99.5%. So my confidence that it was real and important happened probably in 2011, 2012,
Okay.
it was very clear going to Burning Man in 2012 that this was my role, was to support this work.
Wow.
It gave me a life purpose, which was awesome.
So that's your life purpose.
But in terms of, I knew it was real in 2008. I didn't believe that we were on the right path until probably 2018, 2019. Very recently do I believe we're actually on the right path, going the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Very nice. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful time together with you, Martin.
Thank you, I enjoyed it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.